Welcome back to the Pro Ticker Podcast, your Friday morning edition covering major financial magazine headlines, everyone. We've got a fantastic deep dive for you today, pulling together insights from recent reports across CNBC, Bloomberg, and Yahoo Finance. Our mission, as always, is to cut through the noise and get to the core of what's truly impacting your financial world, giving you those aha moments that make being well-informed, well, frankly, a breeze. We'll be navigating the significant ripple effects of a new bill fresh out of Washington, exploring shifting market dynamics, diving into some fascinating tech and crypto discussions, and even checking in on something that affects everyone: gas prices. Okay, let's unpack this. Let's kick things off with the big news dominating headlines this week: the passage of President Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill Act. This legislation has been years in the making, apparently, and it just cleared Congress, ready to be signed into law right before the July 4th holiday. For many of us, the immediate question is always, what does this mean for my wallet?
Right. And what's fascinating here, based on our review of CNBC's coverage, is how this bill largely builds on previous tax policy. At its core, it permanently extends the tax cuts from the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which, were set to expire this year.
Oh, okay, so continuity.
Exactly. This means continuity for most taxpayers, with generally lower tax bills expected next year. On average, all income groups are expected to see a tax cut. The standard deduction, for example, that's increasing significantly for 2025, from $15,000 to $15,750 for single filers and $30,000 to $31,500 for married filing jointly.
So it's a continuation of existing policy, but with some notable new additions. Our sources like CNBC highlighted a few eye-catching, albeit temporary, tax breaks. We're talking about no federal tax on tips capped at $25,000 per year. That's interesting. And no federal tax on overtime pay capped at $12,500 for single filers.
But temporary, right?
Yeah, both slated to expire at the end of 2028. And then there's this deduction for new auto loan interest, up to $10,000. That auto loan deduction sounds like a dream for new car buyers. Is it really that universal?
Well, this raises an important question about applicability, a point CNBC wisely emphasized. While the auto loan deduction is certainly a break, to qualify for the full $10,000, you'd need a loan of roughly $112,000.
Wow, okay. Not your average car loan then.
Not at all. Cox Automotive data reveals this applies to only about 1% of new car loans. So it's really a tax break for the ultra-luxury market, not the average family car. And it's restricted to U.S. assembled vehicles and phases out for higher incomes, too.
Okay, good caveats. But beyond that, the bill does bring some genuinely significant changes for families and savers, as reported by both Yahoo Finance and CNBC.
That's right. It expands a child tax credit slightly to $2,200 per child.
Slight bump.
Yeah. And then there are these Trump accounts, a new type of savings account for children born between 2025 and 2028, seeded with a one-time $1,000 federal deposit. Parents can then contribute up to $5,000 annually after tax.
Interesting concept. And for those thinking about education, the 529 plans are getting a major upgrade too, right? What does this actually mean for families saving for education? How much more flexible do these plans really become?
Precisely. Yahoo Finance detailed that the bill allows for increased annual K-12 withdrawals, jumping from $10,000 to $20,000.
Doubled.
And crucially, it also broadens what counts as a qualified expense to include things like books, tutoring, standardized testing fees, even educational therapies for children with disabilities. This truly makes 529s a much more versatile tool than just, straight college savings.
Definitely sounds more flexible. Beyond these specifics, what about the broader picture for deductions, like charitable giving or the state and local tax, a SOLTI deduction?
Okay, CNBC's analysis indicates several key shifts here.
Yeah.
The bill introduces a permanent above-the-line deduction for charitable contributions for non-itemizers.
Oh, that's for people who don't itemize?
Exactly. Up to $1,000 for single filers and $2,000 for joint filers. This is pretty significant because it allows around 90% of taxpayers, who typically take the standard deduction, to get a tax break for charitable giving, something they couldn't really do before.
Right. And SALT, that's always controversial.
Yeah, for the SALT deduction, the cap is temporarily raised from $10,000 to $40,000 starting in 2025. Now, this primarily benefits higher earners in high-tax states that don't have a personal income tax, like Wyoming, South Dakota, Texas. The Institute on Taxation and Economic Policy estimated the top 1% there could see tax cuts of over $100,000.
That's a very clear benefit for certain demographics then.
Yeah.
But let's connect this to the broader economic and social picture. This bill isn't just about tax cuts. It involves significant spending shifts and cuts elsewhere, a point emphasized by both Bloomberg and Yahoo Finance. What's the real story behind the headlines here?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the legislation is set to add around $4 trillion to the national debt over the next decade. That's according to Yahoo Finance and Bloomberg.
$4 trillion. Wow.
And critically, it also includes substantial cuts to social safety net programs. Bloomberg reports Medicaid funding is projected to be cut by over $1 trillion in the next decade. That could potentially leave 12 million more people without insurance and introduces new work requirements.
That's a huge number.
It is. Similarly, food aid benefits for lower-income Americans are cut by expanding work requirements for federal food stamps to cover beneficiaries up to 65 years old. So this is where the aha moment truly hits, perhaps. Analyses from sources like the Yale Budget Lab, cited by Yahoo Finance and CNBC, they indicate that the lowest earners could actually be worse off, potentially losing an average of $560 a year.
Worse off, even with the tax cuts.
Because the bulk of the tax savings, about 66%, are expected to go to the top 20% of earners. This has made the bill unpopular, actually. 55% opposed it in one poll mentioned by Yahoo Finance.
Okay, so a very complex picture on the personal finance side. Moving from there to industry, this big, beautiful bill also marks a major shift in U.S. energy policy. Our sources, including CNBC, highlight that it really creates a clear distinction between winners and losers in the energy sector.
Indeed. This bill delivers most of the oil and gas sector's top priorities. CNBC detailed that it mandates extensive access to federal lands and waters for drilling. We're talking more than 30 lease sales in the Gulf of Mexico over 15 years, over 30 annually on lands across 9 states, plus access to Alaska.
So opening up a lot of areas.
A lot. And it also slashes the royalties that producers pay the government. Mike Summers of the American Petroleum Institute, an industry lobbying group, called it the most transformational legislation in decades for access.
So a clear win for traditional energy. But many argue we need to transition away from fossil fuels for long-term sustainability. How do these new policies impact America's global standing in renewable innovation?
Yeah, well, unfortunately for renewables, the law phases out long-standing clean electricity investment and production tax credits for wind and solar. These have been crucial to their growth, according to CNBC. These credits, which were extended by the Inflation Reduction Act until at least 2032.
Right, that was not long ago.
No. And now they'll no longer be available for solar and wind farms entering service after 2027. There is a carve-out for projects starting construction within 12 months, but the industry expects investment to slow, factories to potentially close, particularly those tied to U.S.-made components. CNBC also notes this applies to the hydrogen tax credit, which ends in 2028.
So a very clear direction set for the U.S. energy landscape, favoring traditional sources. This could have significant long-term implications. Leaving the halls of Washington, let's now cast our gaze across the globe. As we record this on Friday, July 4th, U.S. markets are closed for the holiday, but Asia-Pacific markets have largely reacted to developing trade tensions. What's moving the needle internationally?
That's right. CNBC reported that most Asia-Pacific markets saw declines. South Korea's Kospi down nearly 2%, Hong Kong's Hang Seng down over 0.5%. Japan's Nikkei was pretty flat. This movement reflects investor anticipation of details on the U.S.'s trade deals ahead of President Trump's looming deadline for higher tariffs next week. Bloomberg detailed this situation.
That deadline is July 9th, right? And it sounds like the administration isn't pulling any punches. Bloomberg is reporting that Trump plans to start notifying countries of tariffs up to 70%. 70%. What does this imply for global trade and the broader economy, particularly for consumers?
Well, this raises an important question about the effectiveness and the ultimate impact of such high tariffs. Bloomberg notes tariffs are typically paid by the importer, but often the cost is ultimately absorbed by profit margins or passed on to the end consumer.
Right, someone pays eventually.
Someone pays. For example, the U.S. just reached a deal with Vietnam, setting a 20% duty on its imports and 40% on goods deemed transshipped through the country, as reported by CNBC. While this is lower than Trump's initially proposed 46%, it's still significantly higher than the universal 10% rate.
Still big jump.
Definitely. Economists, including those from Bank of America cited by CNBC, warn that companies are already paying $190 billion more in tariffs annually. That equates to 7% of corporate profits in the first quarter. And this squeeze on margins is expected to intensify if these costs aren't passed on.
So inflation or lower profits, basically.
Potentially. Goldman Sachs, as reported by Yahoo Finance, projects that while initial consumer price effects have been smaller than expected, overall U.S. GDP growth could slow to a weak 1% by the end of 2025, with inflation rising.
So a mixed picture, with some clear headwinds for global trade. But there was some good news overnight for U.S. markets before the holiday, wasn't there?
Yes, absolutely. On Thursday, before the holiday, a better-than-expected jobs report eased investor concerns about a U.S. economic slowdown. That pushed the S&P 500 and NASDAQ composite to fresh record highs, according to CNBC.
What were the numbers?
The U.S. economy added 147,000 jobs in June, higher than the 110,000 estimate, and the unemployment rate dipped slightly to 4.1%. This showed a clear sense of investor relief.
Good to see some positive data points. Okay, let's pivot to the cutting edge of tech and finance. In the world of AI, there's exciting news from CoreWeave and NVIDIA, but also some significant controversies. First, CoreWeave is making waves as the first cloud provider to deploy NVIDIA's next-generation AI chips, the Blackwell Ultra. This story is getting a lot of attention on CNBC. Why is this such a big deal, and what does it mean for the AI landscape?
What's fascinating here is the immediate competitive edge this gives CoreWeave. As CNBC reported, NVIDIA's Blackwell Ultra chips are designed to produce 50 times more AI content than their predecessors.
50 times.
50. Being the first to deploy these, especially with Dell-built systems featuring 72 Blackwell Ultra GPUs and 36 NVIDIA Grace CPUs, it allows CoreWeave to differentiate itself from larger cloud providers like Amazon, Google, and Microsoft.
So they get a head start on the big guys.
A huge head start. AI developers are clamoring for these chips, so CoreWeave's early access is a significant win. It's reflected in their stock price quadrupling since their IPO. It's almost like they've leapfrogged the giants just by being first to market with this tech.
That's a massive technological leap forward for CoreWeave. But on the flip side, Elon Musk's xAI and its Grok supercomputer in Memphis, they're facing quite a bit of controversy over their power source, according to CNBC. What's at the heart of this environmental debate?
Yeah, this raises an important question about the environmental impact of such massive AI infrastructure. CNBC detailed that xAI received a permit to power its facility with natural gas-burning turbines, despite months of protests from local residents concerned about air quality.
Natural gas turbines for an AI facility.
That's right. Residents have reported poor air quality and a strong stench, linking it to the turbines, which emit pollutants like nitrogen oxides and formaldehyde. The NAACP is even suing xAI, alleging Clean Air Act violations, and satellite images apparently show more turbines on site than the 15 allowed by the new permit.
That doesn't sound good. What's xAI saying?
Well, xAI states their system will have state-of-the-art emissions control technology, making it the lowest emitting of its kind. So that's their counter. It's also worth noting, perhaps, that Tesla, another Musk company, has significantly benefited from xAI's build-out. xAI purchased millions of dollars worth of Tesla's Megapack batteries.
Interesting connection there. Okay, from AI infrastructure to crypto, we're seeing a fascinating, almost theatrical debate unfolding on Wall Street. It's between Jim Chanos, the famed short seller, and Michael Saylor of MicroStrategy. It's all about MicroStrategy's Bitcoin strategy, and Yahoo Finance has been covering this closely. What's truly at stake in this high-profile disagreement?
This is a classic Wall Street debate on valuation and investment strategy, as described by Yahoo Finance. Michael Saylor has transformed MicroStrategy into, well, a Bitcoin juggernaut. He did this by using corporate debt and equity to acquire vast amounts of the cryptocurrency.
And the stock has done incredibly well, right?
Oh, yeah. His company's stock has surged over 211% in the past year, far outperforming Bitcoin itself and the S&P 500. Chanos, however, argues that MicroStrategy should not be valued higher than its underlying Bitcoin holdings. He suggests investors should simply buy Bitcoin directly.
Kind of like just buy the asset itself.
Exactly. He's famously called Saylor's arguments financial gibberish. Strong words.
So Chanos is essentially saying, why buy the wrapper when you can buy the candy? What's Saylor's powerful counterargument to that?
Well, Saylor contends that MicroStrategy shares are easier to own due to compliance and regulatory rules, easier for institutions perhaps, and that the stock's premium reflects investor belief that the company will continue to accumulate Bitcoin, which has a finite supply, according to Yahoo Finance.
So it's a bet on future accumulation, too.
That seems to be the argument. He famously stated, if you want to 10x your money, you buy Bitcoin. If you want 100x your money, you buy Bitcoin with someone else's money. If you want to 1000x your money, you buy Bitcoin with someone else's money, and then you leverage the Bitcoin.
Quite the statement.
Indeed. And while short sellers have taken significant losses betting against MicroStrategy itself, they've apparently found more success against copycat companies adopting similar Bitcoin treasury strategies. It highlights the kind of unique position MicroStrategy holds in the market right now.
Fascinating debate. Okay, let's bring it back to something that hits close to home for everyone, especially with the July 4th holiday weekend upon us. Gas prices.
Yeah.
What's the latest at the pump, and can we finally breathe a sigh of relief?
Good news for drivers. As of July 4th, the national average price for a gallon of regular gasoline stands at $3.15. That marks its lowest level since 2021, according to AAA data cited by Yahoo Finance.
315. That's definitely lower.
It is. That's a dirty 136 cents drop compared to this time last year. GasBuddy estimates Americans will save about $500 million on gasoline this holiday weekend. That's a genuine relief for many commutes and travel plans.
That's fantastic news for holiday travelers. But we know prices can vary wildly across the country, and there are always wild cards that could throw a wrench in things.
Yeah.
What should we be watching out for?
Absolutely. While drivers in the Southeast and Great Lakes might find gas for under $2.50 a gallon, California continues to have the highest prices at $4.57.
Ouch. California always seems high.
Yeah, due to special fuel blend requirements, higher taxes, refinery shutdowns, the usual factors there, as noted by Yahoo Finance. Looking ahead, analysts foresee prices potentially falling below $3 per gallon later this year as the driving season winds down and refineries switch to less expensive winter blends.
Sub $3 nationally. That'd be something.
It would. However, weather, particularly the hurricane season in the Gulf of Mexico and ongoing tensions in the Middle East, remain significant wildcards. Those could send prices climbing again. That's a point emphasized by GasBuddy analysts in Yahoo Finance.
Always something to keep an eye on. Okay, and that wraps up our deep dive into this week's major financial headlines. From the sweeping implications of the one big beautiful bill on our taxes, energy, and social programs, to the intricate dance of global markets reacting to tariffs, the cutting-edge developments in AI chips, the high-stakes crypto debate, and even the welcome relief at the gas pump, it's clear the financial world never stands still.
It really doesn't. And this deep dive really highlights how interconnected these stories are, doesn't it? You see policy in Washington affecting energy production and personal finances, technological advancements shaping investment, geopolitical strategies impacting global trade. It just underscores the importance of looking beyond the surface to understand the underlying currents shaping our economy.
Indeed. And as we consider all these shifts, it raises an important question for you, our listener, to mull over. How will the temporary nature of some of these new tax breaks, coupled with the long-term changes in energy policy and global trade, redefine what financial planning truly means for individuals and businesses over the next few years? We hope this deep dive has given you plenty to think about. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you all Monday morning with new headlines from major financial magazines.